Today's meeting we have Nick LaCarra, and I asked Nick to allow us to shoot questions at him because he's had so much experience over his 24 years in real estate, and he's been a manager of a development and represented properties that are new construction. So I created my list of questions, but if you have questions, just raise your hand, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer your questions. Right? You'll be answering it?
Definitely.
So let's start with what type of properties? I know I mentioned new construction, but what type of properties have you represented clients in selling them and listing them?
Just about everything. In 24 years, when I first started, I was in Lake Arrowhead, California, which is a resort by Big Bear. I don't know if many of you know what it is, but it's a lake, and it is a resort town. Most of them are secondary homes, second homes for buyers. Population at the time that I was there was only 16,000 primary residents. But we had a lot of homes, and I sold homes on little cabins. I started out at $40,000, and they were on dirt roads. And I've sold multi-million-dollar waterfronts as my career progressed. So I've sold just about everything in between. I've run into probably about every situation and difficult incident you could possibly imagine.
So that leads to another question. What do you want to hear first, horror stories or good stories?
Horror stories.
I hear horror stories. Horror stories. All the polite people in the back said, let's hear the good stories. Let's hear the horror stories. So some things situations that didn't go well that you learned from that we would consider horror stories even though it's not Halloween?
Okay. One of them that really stands out is I had a buyer come up to Lake Arrowhead, and this was going to be a primary residence for them, and they wanted a new home, and they wanted a lake view, and they had very specific parameters. We weren't finding anything in the resale market that was already built. Turns out that I suggested they buy a new home, and I had a meet with a gentleman named Kenny Anderson, and he had a home that he was building, and they met with him, and they loved the floor plan. We made a few tweaks. We looked at other homes that he had built. They absolutely fell in love with it. He had just purchased a lot and was getting ready to break ground, and so we made an offer, and we came to terms, and Kenny went through the permit process and started to break ground, and the tractors and the caterpillars came out, and so did the neighbor. And he said, "What are you doing?" And Kenny said, "Well, I'm building a home. I bought this lot." And he said, "No, you're not. I own the ingress-egress that you're on right now." And Kenny had gone through escrow, had purchased that lot. It was not found that there was an ingress. That was basically landlocked. Now we're in escrow. We are basically closed because it's been 45 days since he's been applying for his permits, and we run into this issue. My buyer is just despondent. I mean, we've got a real issue. We called First American Title, and sure enough, they found the little encroachment. They found the strip of land of which he was making the driveway into the house. We're landlocked. That lot is useless. This gentleman said, Kenny bought the lot for about $85,000. The gentleman wanted 50 grand for the easement to get to the lot. And so we called First American Title, who had run the title on Kenny's purchase. We sat down with First American Title. We sat down with Kenny, and we sat down with this gentleman, the neighbor next door. And within about an hour and a half, First American Title wrote him a check. Wow. And we bought the easement in that little parcel of land, which, by the way, was about 20 feet wide and about 60 feet long. Wow. So he got not 30. He didn't get 50. He got 35,000. And we settled. They wrote a check, and we were done. So that was a nightmare.
Was that an Eagle policy or a regular policy? That was an Eagle policy.
Fortunate enough, Kenny had purchased because he is a builder, and he's familiar with the title policies. He purchased an Eagle, and that covered it. Wow. So we were really fortunate they would write a check.
I don't know. That doesn't sound like a horror story. That almost sounds like a good story.
Okay.
Oh, we got a horror story? Okay. Here we go.
Okay. So I get a call from a doctor, and he has a property that has a beautiful lake view, and it's really quite a great property, and he wants to sell it. And he said, because I've got some issues with a lien and some other owners, and I just really want to dump this property. I said, great. So we list it. I do a CMA. I meet with him, run a prelim, And sure enough, he's got a lien, okay? He's got a malpractice suit from the state of California. And they have liened on the property. And as if you know you're dealing with a state, they don't budge. They're going to get their money no matter what. So when the prelim came in, as I'm going through it, I see this malpractice state of California lien. And I'm going through and I'm seeing different names on the prelim. Well, he bought it with 4 other doctors. Didn't mention that. So now I've got this lien that I've got to clear, and that's going to be horrific. And I have 4 other buyers whom they were all, the couples, their wives were all on title. I have 10 names on the prelim. Wow. So I work through the malpractice with the state. It takes me about 2.5 months. I get the lien removed, showing that they're with the additional owners, with the market being what it is, there really was not going to be any money for the state. They released because they had liens on all these other doctors' primary properties. So really, it wasn't that important to them. They just liened just in case. They released the lien. Now my issue is I have 10 people that need to sign. 2 of the doctors are divorced. One of the wives is not real happy with her ex-husband, and the other one has moved to Europe. This was about I think about what, David, a 6-month escrow? It was a nightmare. And we got it closed, and everybody was real happy. But, you know, it looked insurmountable when I was sitting there looking at that prelim. It's like, why did they not mention, you know, he didn't mention, I have a little lien. You know, it was $500,000 lien on the property, which the property was only worth $345,000. Yeah, so we got it released, and that was a nightmare. I mean, it's like, why am I here? But we got through it.
So check your prelim title reports before you list the properties. I'll help check it too as a broker. How does that help your career? How does representing and managing a new project help your real estate resale career?
It helped me a great deal, actually. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about investors' mindset. I learned a lot about what developers are looking for. I learned a lot about return on investment. The very first one that I volunteered for, and I didn't know what I was getting into, was here in Hawaii, because we didn't have condos in California. I mean, in Lake Arrowhead, those were single-family homes. There were only 2 condo developments. But I got here, and I was at another company, and this opportunity came up, and they asked me if I'd like to be a salesperson, and I said no, but I'll be the manager. So they hired me as the manager. I interviewed, and the developer hired. Is it back on? So I go in, and it was in the jungle. I didn't know where the jungle was. It was in Waikiki. They called it the old jungle. It was a very, I guess, unsafe Waikiki at one time. But it was really cute. It was 3 stories. It was 54 units. And the developer had it with our company prior to it going to the company I was with. And his girlfriend was the manager, and she designed them. They were so poorly designed. They were really cute little units. And the problem was when he asked me, why aren't these selling? And I said, there's nothing wrong with your pricing, because I had done my work on the condos and done CMAs in the area. But it was the way they were being presented to the public. So I said, listen, we've got an extra added advantage here. My partner builds homes. He's been doing design work for 20 years. Why don't you let us come in and have David do a couple of them? He said, how much will it cost? And David gave him a cost of $5,000 out the door. He'll completely do one. We can build that into the price, because we're a project. We can change our prices as we see fit. So David did 2. He did 1. We put it on the market, and it sold. We brought it on Saturday. He finished it Friday evening. We brought it on Saturday, and Sunday morning we had a full price offer. Then we did another one. Same thing happened, and David ended up doing about 30 of those units. And Jackie saw them. They were great. It was just little studios. But it's interesting to work with developers to understand what it is they're looking for. I also got to be introduced into condo buyers as they came in and as I was manager. And I also got to work with seeing how agents work and having to kind of help them and direct them. Even though I was pretty new to the condo business, in managing, I've never had to manage agents before. And that was very interesting, the mindset of of individuals who apply for these types of jobs as salespeople in condos, in projects. And there are people who really enjoy that. They don't like agents. There are agents who don't like going out and finding buyers. They like to sit behind a desk and wait for people to come to them. And that's fine. That's what they like to do. But it's also, those agents are not very self-motivated. They're not very driven. They want the business to come to them. So I was working with the team that I didn't select. The other company selected a team of 4 individuals for me, and that was not fun. They were not driven. They were not motivated. They would come in late. They wouldn't turn the lights on in the units, and I really had a lot of training to do. But the most interesting part of this particular one was the gentleman who bought the units. His name was Stephen Davis, and he was out of Los Angeles. Stephen was a very, very interesting guy. What you'll find is with developers, they're quirky. Developers are a whole different animal unto themselves. They're very odd. And so it was getting used to working with that type of person. And I had to kind of really clue into who Stephen Davis was. And I mean, you can't say, you know, you're really weird. You're really odd the way you're going about this. So I was educating him on the market while he was educating me on what a developer is looking at. And I learned a lot. It also built a lot of my business. A lot of those buyers, when they became sellers, came back to me because I was the project manager. They didn't go back to their agent. Some of those agents were on other projects because they're project agents. They weren't around. I was in resale then, and so I sold a lot of those. Again, listed them and sold them. And some of those buyers moved on and bought 1 or 2 better wanted homes. So it built my business. I think getting into projects, for us as agents, it's difficult. When you sell, like right now, we have a lot of projects going up in Waikiki and Kakako particularly. What's difficult for us to swallow is we don't get a commission for 3 years. Who really wants to sell something when you're not going to get a paycheck for 3 years? You move away from that, and again, you're doing the best you can for your client. When you have 2 or 3 of those in the background and they're done and they're deals that are going to come up in 2 or 3 years, it's really kind of neat landscaping to your business, because you're going to go on and do your business and then all of a sudden those are closed and you're going to get a check in 2 or 3 years. So it's kind of interesting landscaping to your business. And invariably, those people that buy in projects usually sell quicker than people who buy in single-family residences. So you'll have repeat business and you'll have referrals from projects. So I think it's just learning about projects, taking the time to understand them, being able to talk about the price per square foot for the HOAs. Does anybody in here know what the normal price per square foot for a new development HOA runs? It's usually the very bottom line on a new development. It's going to be about $1 a square foot, and it's going to run up to, like Trump, at close to a little over $2.15 a square foot. So depending on the caliber of the development. So that's something I learned. I mean, it was very, very interesting. And then I was hired by a Korean company, Hanwha, and I was project manager for Hale Kalai out in Hawaii Kai. That was really interesting. I got very, very involved, and so did David. They ended up, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know the Hawaii market, and that's why they hired me. Yeah, they built half of Dubai. They built freeways throughout Europe. They're huge. But they didn't know a thing about Hawaii. And that's what I discovered in talking to them. So in meeting with the executives of Hanwha, looking at the floor plans with SBC in San Francisco, I said, we've got some things here that are inherently wrong to the market in these floor plans. And they listened. So they ended up having David and I go to San Francisco many times to work with SBC, the architects, and we changed a lot of the floor plans. I think it's important that a developer has someone here on the ground who knows what our buyers are looking for. And hopefully you know what your buyers are looking for, because it's a complete different animal.